about yourself, what you do with at Point to Point, and what Point to Point's all about.
Sure. My name is Erin Killion. I am the Director of Media at Point to Point, which is a B2B-based agency based in Cleveland, Ohio. We actually specialize in the building products space, industrial manufacturing, really looking at how to get that pull-through between distributors, dealers. We work with major clients like Sherwin-Williams, Plygem, Schindler Elevator, Acuity Lighting. Basically, if it involves being included in a building, we've touched it. So.
Okay, well, we know in terms of social, it's Marissa, you're doing it a lot. How about with Point to Point? And your clients very different from the sleep mattress kind of thing.
Absolutely. So B2B is a unique space. I think if you have any experience in this, B2B manufacturers tend to kind of trend about 10 years behind when it comes to how they are engaging with their buyers. For years, it has been, it is very much a network. It is very much a direct sales play. And they're actually realizing, and agencies, really good B2B agencies, are helping them to realize that you have more educated buyers that are farther down the funnel when they actually are ready to talk to someone. So how do we make sure that they're getting in, that they're seen as a resource to these potential buyers, and really just helping to move them down the funnel. So what we actually have found is that we are shifting our clients slowly, but we're getting there, to a more social presence, to a more digital-facing presence. You know, as I said, about 2 years ago, we were still doing, 80% print. I know, everyone I know, I get it. And so I came from a really consumer-facing forward agency that, like, print was not a thing. We really did. And so we were, it's the trade publications, it's the American Painting Contractors, it's the In Paint, it's the, Interiors and Sources, and really just trying to figure out how to continue to leverage that brand awareness play, but also at the same time move them into a space where they know they need to be but are not really sure how to get there.
Are you seeing, since you've been shifting them, are you seeing success, or is it still too soon? Or
no, we're absolutely seeing success. We shifted one of our major clients, Sherwin-Williams, into a more digital space this year, and we're running across a programmatic platform that really multi-touch, very, very cool concepts. And yeah, we're seeing a ton of success. We actually, in the B2B space, we have a little bit of an issue in terms of we don't have an end user, right? So, like, example, Sherwin-Williams does a lot to try to reach architects and designers, but they're not the ones going into the Sherwin-Williams store to buy paint. So I can't do a foot traffic study. I can't tie into their POS because that's not what it's about. So when we look at ways to really to measure the success of campaigns, we're looking at, site traffic lifts. We're looking at engagement with CEU, or like continued education, things like that. And we are seeing a huge lift in social, specifically with video in that space, because they're very digital people. I mean, architects, designers, right, builders.
Yeah, and for Marissa, because we've all been talking about storytelling in terms of, and you obviously with the ad you just showed was a story, but it wasn't really your company's story. So is that important to you, or how important is that aspect of it, or do you find that just keeping them on this campaign to follow this imaginary, leader, that's the story that you want people to follow?
So I think this is I think this campaign is one iteration of a larger platform that we helped establish around this idea of unhustle. And so the brand's actually going to stand for this idea of, because even if you go on LinkedIn or think of Gary Vee, it's all about hustle culture, the walls of a WeWork. And so we have this, I think this translates into organic culture too, where it's this unhustle movement. And so it'll be interesting to see whether Yawn lives on, or if this comes to life in other ways through whether it's what they do with influencers or just kind of building out this brand platform. But we think that there's a lot of there's something interesting about the conversations that are happening online around hustle culture, and so how can the brand kind of capitalize on that and build a conversation around, like, we all need to celebrate sleeping a little bit more and not, like, grinding.
And what about you, Erin, in terms of, I mean, B2B clients, obviously, you know, as you're talking about, they're not necessarily an end user. How important is storytelling, and at least especially on the social aspect?
Absolutely. Storytelling is huge. We need to show our consumer, which is not a consumer, those buyers, specifically the value of the product, right? Especially why there's value in specifying in a product to a project. So absolutely, like we need to tell a story, and paint is paint is paint. It's not. I'm sorry, Sherwin. I'm so sorry. But at the end of the day, it's no, and that's fine. And
it's on the record.
But the conversations that are being had is around service. It's around innovation. It's around, you know, it's not about that gallon of paint. It's about the service that you get from the Sherwin-Williams stores. It's about the product itself and how it is innovative and how they're continuing to make improvements. And so the story is super important on social, and you have more time to actually tell that story, right? Whereas, you know, in other platforms, you don't necessarily get to tell your story in that dynamic of a way.
It sounds like your story, though, is more brand focused, and it seems a lot, as opposed to, you know, with Gravity, it was more the scientific, like what they're doing, as opposed to that happy feeling kind of thing.
Sure.
Do you feel that's the case?
Absolutely. I think it depends on the segment. You know, if we're talking to painting contractors, absolutely. Like but if you're talking to, you know, a builder, like it does have to be a brand story. It has to be why a partnership with Sherwin-Williams or why a partnership with Apply Gem is truly beneficial versus, you know, like a more end user talking about, you know, what maybe it's a little bit easier for the paint goes on easier, or, you know, this adhesive is really strong, not to get too far in the weeds. But yeah, I think that it just depends on the actual segment, how you spin that story.
What about you, Marissa, as far as, you know, even your other clients, not just in terms of what we saw today, are you finding the story you're telling are you keeping more with the brands, or as a lot of people over the past couple of days we've been talking about, and Gravity is a good example as well, that it's not necessarily about the brand, but it's more about what it can do for you in that story, and sort of getting that across?
Yeah, so what we've been doing recently is we've had, let's say on Grammarly, for example. Are you guys all familiar with Grammarly? It's the AI-assisted writing app. So we created a few different stories that were about different personas. One's for a student, one's for a man writing a best man speech. But the idea behind that too, and how we're approaching creating content for this brand, is we're gonna do more story-driven brand narratives that help like establish the brand as like the credibility in the writing space as they continue to evolve their functionality to not just be about grammar. It's about how you're writing and what your intentions are. You can like set it to help you sound more confident or sound, depending on who you're emailing, for example. But we're building a series of spots. Some are brand and story driven. Some are like product montage that actually just really feature and show the product and the different functionality of it. And then some are just a little bit more like DR, where it like straight to the point, like tells you like how using this product is going to like benefit you. And so I think it's the mix of all of those of assets together. I think that's like that sweet spot of like, all right, now I'm understanding how this brand like can work for me in my life, and I should try it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I mean, I saw one of your spots for Grammarly, and it was the one where it showed people actually working, and as they typed in something, oh, it corrected it, good, and they can move forward, or oh, I got an A, you know, and that kind of thing. And I think that that's very compelling, because it's really showing me what I want. And I think as consumers today, that's what they're looking for. How can, you know, you help me more so than I don't really care about your brand as much.
Exactly. I think it's like that, oh, they get me, they get those, like, and I think even on like Facebook too, we think about like these like micro moments of like, okay, so we work with Instacart and we think about like what motivates you for a deliver, like why do you want your get your groceries delivered? But like, you know, I'm a millennial, for example, and like I seamless a lot. So like is it more adult if I were to order my groceries rather than order in food? And like how can we create content that like plays into like those moments and those mindsets. So like each asset really does feel like it's speaking to me. And I think that is the beauty of social, is that you can create these like little moments and these little assets, you know, and you can tell that story in 6 seconds. And you can target it to this one group of people. And I think what we try to do is when we create a spot is, how can we create 20 of those and see which works? How can we tweak the messaging and like, or build a template so that we can tweak that messaging?
And in terms of, because we are talking a lot about social, but how are your media mixes? And I'd like to hear from both of you as far as, is it still, you're trying to get it more equal to television, or, you know, how much is linear leveraging, you know, how much are you leveraging linear?
Just because of our market segments, we actually don't do linear television. It's too massive a reach for us, given that we're trying to target like hyper specific people. So no, we don't factor linear in. So digital really is our biggest play.
What's your media mix look like in terms of, is it just like digital, or
It's
does
print, and then it's like the other end of the.
So there's really no mix. There's a combo.
So we're getting there. We're getting better. No, it's definitely two extremes. So there's a lot of trade specific, site direct that is tied to those, you know, really established print brands. And then there's a lot more of the social and the programmatic and the you know, streaming audio that's kind of going in. We're actually looking at, as we enter into 2020 planning for the majority of our clients, really how we can start leveraging OTT, like those connected television options, because we can get that granular. Now we can hit the audiences that we need, and there's not the worry of necessarily the waste that we would get if we were to buy linear, at least for this, because of the audience segments.
And Marissa, how about you?
I'd say it really varies based on our clients. We definitely, a majority of our clients are spending like, I'm saying 70% of their ad spend, if not more, on YouTube and Facebook. But I think we are seeing a lot of clients who, we made a YouTube spot, now they want us to cut it for TV. How can we optimize it? And so I think we're trying to have that conversation with clients earlier on, so we know like what it is that you guys, what are you guys considering doing, so we can create for that too, or
Well,
have that in
getting
mind.
back to what you were talking about earlier in your presentation, in terms of needing to create, you know, not only for everything, for vertical, for what, you know, all the different channels, and also, you know, Carolyn talked about that. Do you, even if, say your client doesn't know yet, or maybe they're thinking, oh no, never, no, I will not go, you know, TV. Do you sort of troubleshoot that, or sort of, you know, kind of say, well, let's do this just in case, and so that way you can save on the budget?
Yeah, I think that's currently like my personal mission, is like, I'm like, everyone should think about vertical framing. Everyone should write a script for like how to make this a harder hitting spot. Like, cameras are rolling, let's build some time and like, let's create that so we have it, because let's have the ingredients. But you know, it's interesting because there's so many clients where we tried it. We're like, let's capture it. We don't have to. It doesn't have to be deliverable. And then they are like, we don't want to capture it. We want to focus on just this. And then they're like, oh, can you make this work in post? And as you guys were talking about earlier, like no one wants to hear that.
And Erin, I know that was a concern when we were talking, because you just don't have budgets. You know,
Yeah,
clients.
so I mean, this is a very new space for B2B brands and manufacturers. They don't allocate the budget to do production, right? So we've had to get really creative in the assets that we can use and how we piece them together. And I think, you know, our team has done a phenomenal job in terms of leveraging, you know, minuscule budgets and also making the most out of the story, as we were talking about before, and just really creating dynamic pieces without even being able to go to shoot half the time. So, you know, I mean, it's just the budgets aren't there.
Well, but as you said, with social, it's giving you more opportunities, and you don't need as big of a budget as if you went to TV. Now, as far as what you guys are doing now, when you're started, I guess this would be more for you too, Erin. When you've started with social, are you finding that you're getting more results with your other, you know, your prints and your, you know, all of the other digital you've been doing? Is it sort of complementing that, or is it separate from that?
It's definitely a complement. It absolutely is a complementary approach. We're seeing just, you know, increased sales overall. We're seeing increased brand awareness. we're seeing longer like site times, lower bounce rates, things like that. And really, yeah, I mean, we can look at a last touch attribution, but for the most part, we look at it kind of as a holistic omni-channel media approach, and just trying to lift the brand overall.
I mean, obviously, you're using mostly social anyway with your clients, but do you need even TV? I mean, is that something, or how is it working? How do your clients feel about that in terms of the combination of it? Actually, Marissa, I just wanted, sorry.
I think for me, honestly, especially after attending like this for the past few days, like I'm very eager to talk to my clients about this more, because I feel like because we don't do media in-house, and because we've kind of become this agency that like works with a lot of brands that do a lot of their marketing in-house and don't use a media agency, I think that they sometimes don't include us in those conversations, but it's something I'm very interested to better understand. Like, is this something they're considering? Why aren't they considering? Because a lot of times I'm always surprised when I find out, like, oh, this ran on during, like, I'll be watching the Academy Awards, and all of a sudden we'll see, like, a random, 15-second pre-roll that we created that we never thought would make it on TV. So I'm like, oh, well, okay, like, that's cool. But, like, it'd be great to understand like how that came to be and like what decisions went into them deciding to run it then.
Well, and also just in the relationship with these platforms, for advertisers, it's something that's new and it's evolving.
Yeah.
How is that? Has it become something a little bit easier for you to kind of track and to talk with them, or have a better relationship with the different platforms and know what's going on?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think you really do have to stay kind of at the forefront. For agencies, I believe that it is our job to bring these opportunities to our clients, right? Especially if they are in a space that maybe this isn't necessarily their forte. So, we actually really try to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on. And then, leveraging our relationships with the various platforms and figuring out how they can complement each other.
Yeah, I think the same goes for us. Like, one thing that's been great is by working a lot of, like, sometimes like even the platforms will bring us in to work with clients in certain ways. And so we've had a lot of exposure to working with like these digital social platforms. But like, I'm interested like to learn more about how connected TV works, because maybe we can get smarter about how we're capturing things for there and like what the targeting aspects are there. So the same way I understand what we can target for on Facebook, how can we create ads that like could be a little bit more targeted and like speak to the viewer on Hulu or.
Yeah, and even actually Amazon, I was surprised. I was talking to someone, he went to, a couple of weeks ago, they have a 2-week class on how to use Amazon better and how to market your products or your clients. So let's open it up. Anyone have any questions?
Hi. One of my questions is, so social for us is our largest channel. And one of the things that keeps me up at night a little bit is the amount of content. So Marissa, like you said, it's a blessing and a curse, because you can create 20 versions and test everything, but how much is too much, and is it quantity over quality? So for us, I kind of inherited the mindset of having to create at least 20 different versions every single week, which I find crazy. But I would love to hear like your perspective on like how much is too much, and can just a select few good assets really work? I don't have an answer. Would love one.
That's perfect timing, because we just wrapped delivering this campaign, and I think there were maybe 30 something different assets, and like that's just delivery. We also then captured, like, for the testimonials, each of the bedheads reading different value props. Like we were just like, okay, we're just gonna capture everything possible. But then we were like, wait, why do we need all of this content? Like, what are we actually trying to test? And so we had to like get better integrated into like building this like matrix, and I think that that's like something we can only like evolve and get better at that process. So like in the future we can continue to plan better and understand, but like I think understanding too like what our clients are looking for and in their roles, like if this client's on the brand team, but we also understand that their performance team like needs these assets, like really just understanding what those content needs are or maybe, so we can map out a plan that makes sense. And then maybe it's like we're gonna do this in waves, right? So maybe we deliver these assets with the intent that we're gonna test for X, Y, and Z, and then we can, whether it's we're gonna drop it's modular. We're going to drop in a different value prop there, or we're going to start with a different opening shot. Like we need a system. We need a plan, right? Because otherwise we're just kind of throwing content and seeing what sticks, and it's really overwhelming because there's no perfect science to why one video is working and one isn't. So
we have a similar issue, I think. You know, with just the nature of ephemeral content today, right? Like, and not having production budgets, not having the ability to truly, to always create new content. Like, how do you make sure that your content stays fresh and that it is quality without sacrificing, or, you know, like it's this like balancing act that becomes really challenging. And I think we all live in the content constantly, so it feels very like we get tired of it, we're overwhelmed with it, let's come up with something new, like new. I think clients are sometimes the same way. And so it's really just kind of managing that expectation of like, make sure it's quality content and then use it in all of the different places you need to use it, instead of like, just let's get stuff out there constantly and like, you know, reinvent the wheel every time.
I actually was, when you were just talking, and Marissa, I noticed with what you in your presentation, because we know with any social, video always performs the best. I mean, that's just a given. But also the sound off, which having those, how important is it to always be able to be sound off in social? You know, so to incorporate that into it, even if it never gets played that way, is it something that you always make a priority?
I think it's a challenge that like I put on the creative team to, whenever we're ideating any concept, to factor in, because I mean, sometimes you can put subs, right, on the asset, but I don't know about you guys, but I'm not reading subs on a video, like especially an ad. And so how can, you know, on social, if you're scrolling in your feed, like you might be in a meeting or like you're in a place where your headphones aren't in. So I think it is important when you're thinking about in feed and that mindset to create for that. But that asset, like, you know, we do put music there. Like we do build it too so it can work if you do have the sound on. But I think it's interesting and important to like, there is that like those two worlds, one where you have your sound on your phone and one where you don't.
Well, even if it's just maybe, you know, it doesn't have to be all telling the story in print, or how did you word it? I kept thinking graphic, but it's not graphic. But anyway, it's not all about telling that story, because some do tell more of the story. But sometimes it's just that pop, you know, and it's just saying like the 20% or the, you know, more comfort, or, you know, whatever it may be. So that's getting the point across without maybe taking too much away from the creative look of it.
I mean, we actually create sound off, like that's our primary thing, right? Because it goes back to like the VO, and it goes back to production and things like that. So we've just found a lot of success with having, you know, kind of that like music in the background, but really the majority of the spot it's about what's on that screen, right? And then driving people to the landing page to learn more, because it is more about an education-based thing.
And I think what you said earlier about like making it dynamic, I think like that's everything. It's like, okay, no matter how long or short or whatever the video is, like what you need to convey with text or in general needs to be dynamic, because if you're in your feed, like you're gonna scroll past it. You're not gonna remember it.
I just know with social, especially like when I'm talking to people, the text is always just so important in some aspect, but you don't want to hurt your ad, you know, in terms of how it looks visually. But at the same point, a lot of people, when they're watching social, they are in the office and they keep it down, or, you know, on the train, and they don't necessarily have their headset.
I mean, I always challenge our team. I'm like, we have like a test account. I'm like, I need to see the asset in like on the platform in the unit, because I want to be able to scroll past it and like understand that experience to see if it's gonna pop. Like, is it going to get my attention?
What do you think that first, you know, how many seconds do you have to like, because you're scrolling, how quick does that first shot need to pop?
No time at all.
I mean, if you can make it relevant to your audience, like how are you a resource to them, right? That's what it's about. It's always about how can you help to make their job easier? And so if you can convey that in, you know, 1 second, in 3 seconds, whatever that may be, like you just need to help. That's part of telling the story. That's part of grabbing their attention. That's why it's dynamic. It's not about sitting there and like telling people your value props. It's not, you know, what makes you different. It's how those differences make your brand easier to use, or how their job now becomes easier. And so really, it could be 1 second, it could be 3 seconds, it could be, you have 6 minutes if it's like an engaging enough piece, because it's relevant to them.
And I think in that regard, that's why like the Now This News like inspired piece that I showed you guys earlier, like we like to think about what is the content everyone's choosing to consume and what does that look like? Because not that I want to confuse you, but I think it's like a format you're used to and you may be more likely to like have the patience to give it a second and you're interested.
Well, that was great. Well, thank you. And everyone, thank Erin and Marissa for being here.